Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. Justin Trudeau is out. He has stepped down as Canada's Prime Minister. We told you about this yesterday. Trump is still mocking him. Canadians are celebrating with burger discounts and Indians are wondering if ties will finally improve. And that's what we will discuss tonight. What does Trudeau's exit mean for Canada's relationship with India? Also in focus, why Europe is telling Elon Musk to back off and how he, along with Donald Trump, seems to have mastered the politics of provocation. But are they getting tired of each other already? We'll tell you what reports say. How China has unleashed a monster ship on the Philippines. Why the US has blacklisted the maker of the game PUBG. Why Joe Biden is overactive during his notice period as president. The aftermath of the earthquake in Tibet. How Emmanuel Macron insulted Africa and how leaders have hit back. Why Singapore and Malaysia are coming together to create a business hub. Is this an attempt to counter China? Why Squid Game faces a ban in Vietnam? And are you feeding your brain right? New research proves the old saying, you are what you eat. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. Angry protests in Gilgit-Baltistan halt trade between Pakistan and China. Protesters blocked the highway connecting the two countries. The highway is part of the China-Pakistan economic corridor. The locals are angry over frequent power cuts lasting for as long as 20 hours. Gilgit-Baltistan faces some of the worst power outages in South Asia. Sri Lanka's president to travel to China next week. This comes a month ahead of Anura Kumara Dissanayike's first budget. China is the island nation's largest bilateral lender. This will be Dissanayike's second foreign trip since being elected in September 2024. His first trip was to India last month. More trouble for South Korea's impeached President Yoon Suk-yeol. Investigators get a new arrest warrant against him after the first one expired. Yoon remains holed up in his residence surrounded by hundreds of guards. He is under fire for declaring martial law on the 3rd of December. In India, assembly elections will be held in Delhi on the 5th of February and votes will be counted on the 8th of February. The ruling Aam Aadmi Party is seeking a third consecutive term. This election is a three-way contest between the Aam Aadmi Party, the BJP and the Congress. The first Qatari commercial flight in nearly 13 years lands in Damascus. As international traffic resumes at Syria's main airport, this comes nearly a month after rebels toppled Bashar al-Assad's regime. Syria's domestic carriers have also restarted their operations. And Meta scraps its fact-checking program. Instead, it will implement a community notes model. It will be similar to the one that exists on Elon Musk's X. Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg says fact-checkers have been too politically biased.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
Justin Trudeau is gone. He won't be fighting the upcoming election, and he certainly won't be Prime Minister. Canadians are naturally talking about this news, but surprisingly, so are Indians. Trudeau had a very bad relationship with New Delhi. He shielded Khalistani separatists. He accused India of killing terrorists in Canada, and he expelled Indian diplomats. So a lot of Indians are asking the obvious question: will Trudeau's exit fix the relationship? To answer that, we must look at Canada's political future. Their parliament was supposed to convene later this month, but Justin Trudeau has asked for a delay. He wants the Governor-General to prorogue the session.
Despite best efforts to work through it, Parliament has been paralyzed for months after what has been the longest session of a minority parliament in Canadian history. That's why this morning I advised the Governor-General that we need a new session of Parliament. She has granted this request, and the House will now be prorogued until March 24th.
So the Canadian Parliament will meet in March. The idea is to give Trudeau's Liberal Party some time. A leadership contest takes around 4 months. If they speed things up, they could have a new leader by late March. And who would that be? Around 3 or 4 names are doing the rounds. The first is Chrystia Freeland. She was Trudeau's Deputy Prime Minister for 4 years, but in December she resigned in protest. The second is Mark Carney, a former governor of Canada's central bank. Trudeau tried to recruit him as finance minister, but Carney refused. Apparently he has bigger ambitions. The third contender is Anita Anand. As her name suggests, she is of Indian heritage. She has been the Minister of Defence and Public Services. Right now, she is the Minister of Transport in Canada. A fourth name is Dominique LeBlanc, Finance Minister and longtime friend of Justin Trudeau. He too comes from a political dynasty. 3 of these leaders were in Trudeau's cabinet. They backed all his decisions against India, so do not expect a U-turn. But frankly, it's not about them. Let's say the Liberals elect a new leader by March. 2 things can then happen. 1, the opposition pushes a no-confidence vote. The Liberals lose and elections are called. Every poll says that the Conservatives will win the next election, so the new Liberal leader will be Prime Minister for maybe 1 month, which is not long enough to make a dent. That is one scenario. The second one is that the Liberals survive the trust vote. Even then, elections are slated in October, so the new leader will be in office for about 5 months. By then, Trump will be president in the US, so Canada will be too busy to focus on India. And come October, elections will happen. So I guess all roads lead to the same person, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. He will be Prime Minister at some point in 2025, but he's not willing to wait. He wants an election right now.
We need a carbon tax election now to choose between the NDP Liberal costly coalition that taxes your food, punishes your work, doubles your housing costs, and unleashes crime and drugs in your community. Or common sense Conservatives who will axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
He's almost certain to win because the public sentiment is firmly with him. Just look at this store in British Columbia. They're selling $2 burgers to celebrate Trudeau's resignation. If that does not sum up the political climate, nothing will. Which is why Pierre Poilievre is on course to win. The question is, how will he handle India? Let's look at 3 factors here. 1, his past statements. 2, his party's history with India and Khalistanis. And 3, his priorities as Prime Minister. When Trudeau accused India, Poilievre supported him. He called the alleged attack an affront to Canada's sovereignty. He also paid tributes to Hardeep Singh Nijjar. But there was a crucial difference. Poilievre also asked Trudeau to come clean, to reveal the evidence he had on the case, which is also what New Delhi has been saying. So that's the first factor to consider. The second is the Conservative track record. Historically, they have never won the Sikh vote. Most Canadian Sikhs vote for the Liberals and the NDP. In a close election, those votes may have mattered. But right now, the Conservatives have a 20-point lead over the Liberals. They do not need to appease Khalistanis in Canada. Plus, the last Conservative government was quite good for India. It was led by Prime Minister Stephen Harper. He apologized for the Air India bombing in 1985, an attack carried out by Khalistanis. Listen to what he said. This was Stephen Harper in 2010. I'm quoting, "It is incumbent upon us all not to reach out to, but rather to marginalize, to carefully and systematically marginalize those extremists who seek to import the battles of India's past here and then to export them back to that great and forward-looking nation." Let me simplify that for you. He said that Canada should not import Khalistanis. Instead, they should send them back to India. And it wasn't just statements. Under Harper, bilateral trade doubled. Investments went up from $700 million to $55 billion. And Canada reversed its position on India's nuclear program. All in all, a good reset before Trudeau ruined it. And finally, the third factor. What will be the priorities for Pierre Poilievre? His biggest challenge will be Donald Trump. He's threatening Canada with a 25% import tariff. He's asking Canada to join the US. Even yesterday, Trump repeated this offer. He said if Canada became the 51st US state, all of these problems could be avoided. That will be the first priority for Poilievre. His second will be Canada's economy and inflation. That's what sealed Trudeau's fate. And that's where India could help. Right now, the India-Canada free trade talks are paused, but Poilievre may want to revive it. He's talked about expanding exports to India, especially natural gas, uranium, and lentils. So it's a question of what he will prioritize, a deal with India or a witch hunt started by his predecessor. Poilievre does sound more pragmatic than Justin Trudeau. He will also have much bigger issues on his plate. That does not mean that he will abandon the Niger issue altogether, but he could take a different approach. We'll have to wait and see what that approach is. So Justin Trudeau is on his way out. He announced his resignation yesterday. World leaders are yet to wane. But Donald Trump is not just another world leader. He is Donald Trump. Subtlety is not his strong suit. So Trump put up this post. Let me quote from it. This is what Donald Trump posted on social media. Many people in Canada love being the 51st state. The United States can no longer suffer the massive trade deficits and subsidies that Canada needs to stay afloat. Justin Trudeau knew this and resigned. No words about the outgoing leader, no calls for stability. This is not your typical diplomatic response to a resignation. Instead, Donald Trump is reiterating his musings. In December, he floated the idea of Canada becoming the 51st US state. Trump argued that Canadians wanted the two nations to merge for Canada to become a part of the United States. And now with Trudeau stepping down, he's doubling down on his vision. And it does not stop with Canada. Donald Trump has his eyes on a bigger prize, Greenland. He wants to make the island great again. So MAGA, but the ice edition. Donald Trump's son has landed in Greenland. He even posted videos from the Trump Force One. This is a private visit. He has no meetings set up with government officials. Greenland says it is not up for sale. Yet Donald Trump is selling this visit like a recce visit, like visiting an apartment before buying it. And his antics are part of a broader strategy, the politics of provocation. Trump has championed it. In his last stint in power, in fact, he was the disruptor-in-chief. And this time he has a partner in crime, Elon Musk, who has single-handedly riled up Europe. In the UK, the target is the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer. Musk has been attacking him and his Labour government. He's put out dozens of posts. He wants Keir Starmer imprisoned. He's asked King Charles to dissolve the parliament. He's wondering if the US should liberate the UK. Then we have Germany, which is heading into an election soon. Musk has criticized German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. He's backing another party, a far-right party called the AfD, that's the Alternative for Germany party. The exchanges have been sharp and frankly uncalled for. And all of this has alarmed European leaders. They're asking Elon Musk to back off.
Those that are spreading lies and misinformation as far and as wide as possible. They're not interested in victims. They're interested in themselves.
The crucial thing is that Mr. Musk has supported a partly right-wing extremist party, and as you can see, is not only acting in this direction in this country. And that is something we not only disagree with, I reject that.
The sentiment is pretty much the same from French President Emmanuel Macron to the Norwegian Prime Minister, everyone is bothered by Musk's continuous meddling. But that isn't going to stop him. You see, Donald Trump and Elon Musk thrive on disruption. What is different is their tone and execution. Trump's approach is the opposite of subtle. It's a playbook that he's used time and again. Make an outrageous claim, double down when challenged, and revel in the media circus that follows. Musk, however, is more surgical in his provocations. His tweets come in unpredictable bursts, each one a calculated jab aimed at his target. His strategy is not about chaos for its own sake. It is designed to provoke outrage with precision. Together, the two have weaponized the politics of provocation. They're testing the limits of diplomatic patience. But here is the twist. They may also be testing each other's patience. Reports say Trump is getting a little tired of Elon Musk. And honestly, we can see why. Right now, Musk is camping at Trump's Mar-a-Lago. He's renting a $2,000 per night cottage. So he's practically living in Trump's backyard, like that house guest you cannot seem to get rid of. Reports suggest that Donald Trump is not a fan of this arrangement. The word on the street is that he finds Musk a bit clingy. Yes, that's why he's eyeing Greenland. Maybe he just needs an entire island to get some space. But jokes aside, this politics of provocation comes with serious risks. Yet, yes, in the short term, it might keep the media buzzing and social media algorithms humming. But in the long run, Trump and Musk's actions will have consequences. They are alienating American allies and stoking divisions. So the question is, at what point does provocation stop being a clever strategy and start becoming reckless self-destruction? It is a question worth asking. Until then, the world remains their stage, chaos their script, and the rest of us their captive audience.
Please leave this area immediately.
The choppy waters of the South China Sea are witnessing fresh turbulence. China is threatening the Philippines again, this time with a massive warship. A warship called Monster. It is the world's largest Coast Guard vessel, and it does look like a monster. This is the ship we are talking about. It has a displacement of 12,000 tons. It is 165 meters in length. That's equal to 3 Olympic-sized swimming pools. It has an intimidating presence. It also has considerable firepower. The ship is armed with heavy weapons. We're talking about machine guns and a fully equipped helicopter unit. This Chinese monster ship was seen around Scarborough Shoal. It is part of the disputed South China Sea. Both China and the Philippines claim the Scarborough Shoal. The monster ship has been loitering around this atoll. Manila spotted it. They dispatched their Coast Guard. They ordered the Chinese ship to leave. The crew of the Monster was warned. They were told that they have no authority to operate in the area.
Coast Guard, CD5901. This is BRP Cabra, MRRB 4409. We are reminding you that you are within 72.6 nautical miles west by the south of Silangin, Zambales, inside in the Philippine Exclusive Economic Zone. Please leave this area immediately. Over.
But the crew ignored the warning. They refused to leave, claiming that they have every right to be there. The Philippines is not backing down either. Manila ships have been tailing and shadowing this vessel, and the situation remains tense. In fact, this tension has been simmering for almost a year now. Manila and Beijing have clashed multiple times at sea. Their ships have collided. Water cannons have been fired. In one incident, a Filipino sailor lost a thumb. This happened when the Chinese Coast Guard carried out an attack. The Chinese were behaving like pirates. They blocked a Philippine Navy vessel and threatened its crew with knives, sticks, and an axe. Now we are in a new year, but China has not given up its old ways. On the contrary, it is becoming more aggressive. Deployments in the region have increased. Along with the Monster, 3 other Chinese ships have been spotted. Chinese militia are also roaming in the area. They have at least 7 ships in this disputed region. These militia are an extension of China's military. They operate with direct support from Beijing. Plus, the Chinese military has been conducting drills in this region. These exercises include both naval and air forces. So China is deploying more military assets. It is boosting its defense capabilities around the Philippines. The goal is quite obvious: to ramp up pressure on Manila. China uses the same tactics against Taiwan too. This is called gunboat diplomacy. The idea is to overwhelm and intimidate by flexing your military muscle. Nearly every day, Taipei spots Chinese warships near its waters. Chinese jets are also frequent visitors. Taiwan often detects them in its air defense zone. In recent weeks, China has stepped up deployments around Taiwan as well. Last month, it sent as many as 90 ships, 90 ships near the island. Taipei called these deployments alarming.
This number of China Navy and Coast Guard ships in the region was indeed very alarming. And how they are scattered is beyond the eastern border of Taiwan between the first and second island chain. I think their China intention is very clear.
Chinese military is also engaging in sabotage. This week, an undersea cable was damaged. This is quite similar to what we've seen in Europe, where multiple cables have been sabotaged in recent times. This one was located off the northeast coast of Taiwan. A Chinese ship dragged its anchor over it. Remember, these cables are critical for communication. They transmit data signals. They keep the internet running. If these cables are damaged, they could isolate Taiwan from the rest of the world. Thankfully, that did not happen this time. The damage was not severe enough to disrupt communication, but the intent was quite clear. So, like Manila, Taipei is not taking this lightly. They are investigating this incident as an act of sabotage. They cannot afford to lower their guard. China is becoming more brazen, raising the military pressure on neighbors and the risk of a dangerous face-off. And staying with China, their companies are facing trouble in the United States. Remember the game PUBG? The company behind PUBG has been blacklisted by the Pentagon. The company is called Tencent. Pentagon is, of course, the American Defense Ministry. The biggest games developer in the world, that is Tencent for you, and it's not alone. The US has placed dozens of Chinese firms on a blacklist. They say these companies are military firms, meaning they do business with China's army. And look at the fallout. Tencent shares fell more than 7% today. Another blacklisted firm, CATL, fell almost 3%. Now, CATL is a Chinese battery maker. It is the largest in the world. So clearly, Joe Biden is not holding back. He has targeted 2 of China's crown jewel companies, the largest gaming firm and the largest battery maker. China has lashed out at the decision. They say the US is unfairly suppressing Chinese businesses.
The development rights of the Chinese people cannot be deprived or ignored. We urge the U.S. to immediately correct its wrong practices and lift the illegal unilateral sanctions and long-arm jurisdiction against Chinese enterprises. China will take necessary measures to firmly safeguard the legitimate rights and interests of Chinese enterprises and protect its rightful development rights.
Beyond the stock hit, what does this move mean? If you are put on this list, you cannot do business with the US military. That is the main problem. Having said that, it's not a sanction. You can still sell your products in the open market, just not to the US military. Nonetheless, these companies are worried, A, because it's a blot on their business, and B, because it is indicative of more trouble. Tomorrow, the Treasury could cite this blacklisting to sanction them, and that will hurt. Both Tencent and CATL have denied the accusation. They say they're not military suppliers. They also plan to legally challenge this move. But do they have a case? Well, Donald Trump used this blacklist liberally in his first term as president. One of the firms he targeted was Xiaomi. But the company challenged the Pentagon's decision. And in 2021, Trump's successor, Joe Biden, reversed the move. So there is precedent for U-turns, which is why Tencent and CATL will be hopeful. But this move is not just about them, it's also about Joe Biden. He is in the lame duck phase of his presidency, sort of like a notice period. His last day on the job will be January 20th. Until then, he's supposed to be a lame duck. No big decisions, no major policy moves, and no controversies. But looks like Biden did not get the memo. Just look at everything that he's done since Trump won the US election. He pardoned his son Hunter, something that he promised he would never do. He's also pardoned 39 people in total. He commuted the death sentences of 37 prisoners, some of whom committed gruesome crimes. In total, Biden has commuted around 1,500 sentences. He relaxed H-1B visa rules, even as Republicans fought over it. He allowed Ukraine to strike deep inside Russia. He considered airstrikes on Iran's nuclear sites. He's sending weapons worth $8 billion to Israel. He has blocked Nippon Steel's takeover of U.S. Steel. He has set a new climate goal for the U.S. And yesterday, he banned offshore drilling in many areas. And that last one is very important, because Donald Trump has promised to increase drilling. That's a solution to rising prices, to produce more energy at home. But Biden has thrown a spanner in the works. His ban covers 625 million acres of ocean, near Alaska, near Texas, near California, and along Washington state. Now, Trump has promised to reverse this ban, but it's easier said than done. Biden used a 1953 law to ban drilling in these parts. This law allows a president to take away mineral leasing and drilling, but it does not allow a president to reverse it, meaning Trump cannot overturn the ban. He will need the US Congress to amend the law first. Only then can he change it. All these last-minute moves reveal how desperate Joe Biden is, desperate to leave a legacy, because history is not always kind to one-term presidents, more so if you're weak. Biden presided over 2 full-blown wars. He pulled out of the election at the last moment, and his chosen candidate lost. So Biden is trying to do damage control. He's expected to visit Italy later this week. He wants to end his term with a meeting with the Pope. After he returns, he's expected to address the nation twice. All of this reeks of desperation. You cannot build a legacy in your lame duck phase. You had 4 years to do that. Biden spent most of his term escalating wars and supporting massacres in West Asia. Last-minute pardons won't change that. Now let's shift our attention to Tibet. The region was struck by a powerful earthquake today. The quake measured 7.1 on the Richter scale. Tremors were felt in Nepal, Bhutan, and even in India. But Tibet has suffered the worst damage. More than 100 people are dead and dozens are wounded. Many more remain trapped under the rubble. The rescue efforts are proving to be challenging. It is winter season. The local conditions are harsh, with temperatures dropping to minus 18 degrees Celsius. Chinese authorities are scrambling. They're rushing rescue workers and relief materials, and these teams are racing against time. Here's a report.
This was the moment when the earthquake struck. It was a powerful one, measuring over 7 on the Richter scale. Tremors were felt in Nepal, even in some parts of India. But Tibet has suffered the worst damage. It was the epicenter of the earthquake. Entire buildings have been reduced to rubble there. Over 1,000 homes have collapsed and more than 100 people have lost their lives. The rescue effort has been challenging. Dozens of aftershocks have slowed down the rescue workers. They have been unable to get to the survivors, many of whom remain trapped below the rubble. Shigatse is likely the worst-hit city in Tibet. It is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. Shigatse is of great historical significance in Buddhism. It is a holy site and the seat of the Panchen Lama, one of Buddhism's most senior figures. The Dalai Lama expressed his sadness over the loss of life in the natural disaster. Shigatse was annexed by China in the 1950s. Since then, it has been under Beijing's tight control. The Chinese state curtails any flow of information from Shigatse. Access to media and the internet remain limited and restricted. The rescue efforts there will be extremely challenging. Shigatse is a remote city far from China's major urban centers. The harsh winter adds to the difficulty. Temperatures in Shigatse drop to minus 18 degrees at this time of year. China's President Xi Jinping has issued orders to his officials. Vice Premier Zhang Guoqing has been dispatched to the region. Xi Jinping wants the casualties to be minimized and survivors to be resettled. 1,500 rescuers and 250 vehicles have been pressed into the search effort, but they are racing against time. To save lives, they will have to mobilize quickly. The relief materials are yet to reach the victims. The pictures released by the Chinese state show rescue workers working in harsh conditions. They are digging through the rubble, using ropes, shovels, and even their bare hands. Shigatse is highly vulnerable to earthquakes. It lies near a major fault line. The area experiences frequent seismic activity. In the last 5 years alone, it has recorded 29 earthquakes. In 2015, Nepal was struck by a 7.8 magnitude quake, killing over 9,000 people. This time, disaster has hit China.
Our next story is about Emmanuel Macron. The French president faces trouble from all sides. The war in Ukraine has hammered Europe. Macron's dreams of leading the continent lie in tatters. His grip on domestic power has weakened because of the poorly thought out election that he conducted last year. And farmers are protesting all over France. Everywhere you look, there's chaos. You would think it couldn't get any worse. But somehow, Macron has managed to create even more trouble for himself. The French president did it again yesterday, another classic foot-in-the-mouth moment where he casually insulted a bunch of African nations. Take a look.
One part was our commitment to fighting terrorism since 2013. We were right. I think some have forgotten to say thank you, but that's okay. It'll come in time. I'm in a good position to know that ingratitude is a disease that cannot be transmitted to humans. But I say this for all the African governments who have not had the courage, in the eyes of their public opinion, to bear it. None of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region.
That was Macron giving a grand foreign policy speech, addressing a gathering of French ambassadors and chalking out the way ahead this year. Somehow, Macron thought that this was the right time to pick a new fight with people who already don't seem to like him very much, the people of Africa. You know that France has been on the back foot in Africa over the past few years. It had military bases all over the continent, mostly in its former colonies in West and Central Africa. French troops have been squatting there for decades, ostensibly to provide security cover. But on their watch, West Africa became a terror hotspot. Boko Haram, the Islamic State West Africa province, the Islamic State Sahel province, Al-Qaeda and its offshoots like the JNIM, all these terror groups have been running rampant in the Sahel region. In former French colonies like Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, right under the noses of the French troops stationed there. This instability led to multiple military coups in West Africa, in Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger. And the military juntas promptly decided to switch partners. They kicked France out and chose to work with Russia instead. They believed that the Russians would be more effective against the terrorists. The decision had a knock-on effect. Anti-France sentiment started spreading to other countries hosting French troops like Chad, Senegal, and most recently the Ivory Coast. This is a massive failure for France, a moment of shame. But Macron does not see it that way. He says Paris is not on the back foot. Instead, he blames the African nations. Macron called them, and I'm quoting, ungrateful. And then he said, and let me quote again, none of them would be in a sovereign country today if the French army had not been deployed in this region. This is the French president, the leader of a former colonial power, talking about countries that won their independence from France. Macron says the French army is responsible for their sovereignty. How tone-deaf can you be? If anything, the African countries would have been sovereign sooner if not for the French army. Macron's mental gymnastics are truly world-class, but obviously the African nations were not impressed. Chad and Senegal have called him out. Chad's foreign minister issued a statement. He said Macron holds, and I'm quoting again, a contemptuous attitude towards Africa and Africans. He added that the French presence in Chad has often been limited to its own strategic interests without any real lasting impact for the development of the Chadian people. And then he reminded Macron about how Africans had helped France, especially during the 2 world wars. That was Chad's rebuke. Senegal's was even sharper. Prime Minister Ousmane Sonko put up this post on social media. He counters Macron's claims, saying that France helped destabilize countries like Libya, which contributed to the Sahel security crisis. And then Sonko issued a parting shot. Let me quote again. This is what he said. This is finally the place to remind President Macron that if African soldiers, sometimes forcibly mobilized, mistreated and ultimately betrayed, had not deployed during the Second World War to defend France, it would perhaps still be Germany today. During the Second World War, Germany had occupied parts of France. We know that the US, Britain and the Soviet Union helped liberate the country, but we often forget the role of African soldiers, conscripts from French colonies who fought to free France from the Nazis. It seems Macron had forgotten this too, but Sonko was happy to remind him. All this shows just how untethered Macron is from reality. Instead of acknowledging his failures, instead of respecting the wishes of the African people, he has chosen to insult them. It's another mess of his own making, one that will probably accelerate France's departure from Africa. Now let's turn to Southeast Asia. A major development took place today. 2 countries have come together to create a major business hub. Singapore and Malaysia have signed a new deal. They plan to create a massive special economic zone in the Malaysian state of Johor. Malaysia will provide land and infrastructure. Singapore will bring investments. Together, the 2 neighbors hope to reshape Asia's business landscape. Our next report has the details.
Singapore is one of Asia's greatest success stories. The tiny island nation has one of the highest per capita incomes in the world, beating the US and most European nations. But it has one major disadvantage: its size. Singapore's total area is about 735 square kilometers. For context, that's the size of just New York City's land area. Delhi is over twice as large as Singapore, and Tokyo is more than 3 times bigger. So while Singapore is extremely well off, its growth is restricted. The island nation can't spawn new land to develop. So instead, it has opted to partner with its neighboring country, Malaysia. Singapore and Malaysia have signed an agreement to create a joint special economic zone. It'll be located in Johor in Malaysia. The SEZ will span 3,500 square kilometers. That's more than 4 times the size of Singapore. This will allow both Singapore and Malaysia to expand their economic footprint.
It's an important project which will build on the complementary strengths of Singapore and Johor, so that we can both be more competitive, enhance our value proposition, and jointly attract more investments to our shores.
The SEZ is a unique initiative. Very rarely do you find 2 countries working together as a team. You can see any part of the world where 2 countries decide to work together, promote both countries.
The prime ministers of the 2 nations signed the agreement earlier today. They say it's a win-win situation. Malaysia will provide the land, Singapore will provide investments. To make the SEZ more attractive, Malaysia will also lower taxes, both corporate and personal income tax. Reports say that the SEZ could add $26 billion to Malaysia's economy annually. It's an ambitious plan, building up a new industrial area around a wealthy island economy. It has actually been done before. China did something similar by building up Shenzhen around Hong Kong. That was part of the inspiration behind the new Johor SEZ. But Malaysia and Singapore aren't trying to copy China. They hope to surpass it.
Because the greater competition we face is not amongst ourselves within ASEAN, it's outside of the region. Everyone is trying to anchor major projects now in today's world where the big economies are all talking about reshoring, onshoring, nearshoring. They want the key projects to be nearer to their home economies. So ASEAN has to come together, look at ways in which we can enhance our value proposition and be competitive together.
Singapore's Prime Minister seems to be referring to all the talk of decoupling and de-risking from China. A number of companies have been looking for alternatives to China, and many have landed in ASEAN nations like Vietnam. This Johor SEZ could act as a new destination for investment. Now, Singapore and Malaysia don't want to pick a fight with Beijing. Chinese businesses are being welcomed to the SEZ too. But if the Johor SEZ takes off, it could reshape Asia's economic landscape. But there are some hiccups though, some long-standing issues between Malaysia and Singapore. There are tiffs involving water supplies, maritime boundaries and airspace. But Singapore and Malaysia say they're working to resolve these issues. If they manage to, it could turbocharge Asia's growth in the years to come.
Imagine this. It's 9 a.m. on Monday. You shuffle into the office, coffee in hand. You're ready to battle another week of endless meetings, but you notice something different. There's a new hire sitting at the desk across from you. They don't need caffeine. They don't make small talk. And most importantly, they don't have a body. Meet virtual employees. They are designed to work alongside humans or potentially instead of them. So should this prospect bother you? What is a virtual employee, and is your job in danger? Let's start with the term itself, virtual employees. Simply put, these are AI agents, bots running on artificial intelligence. They were mentioned in Sam Altman's blog post. He is the founder and CEO of OpenAI. He wrote, and I quote, "We believe that in 2025, we may see the first AI agents join the workforce and materially change the output of companies." Sam Altman believes this is the year 2025 is when AI agents clock in with us. No need for onboarding or benefits, just plug them in and they're ready to go. Technically, he's not wrong. Some companies are already ahead of the curve. Take McKinsey, for example. They have partnered with Microsoft to build a new AI agent, one that is capable of handling client inquiries. Guess they want an assistant who does not complain about back-to-back meetings. And they aren't the only ones. OpenAI too is planning to launch its own agent called Operator. It can write code. It can take care of all menial tasks. Then there's Microsoft's new AI suite. It's called Copilot Studio. Anthropic has also launched a new AI model. This one can move the mouse cursor and type out text. So you get the gist. These AI agents seem to be the future. McKinsey predicts that 30% of US work hours could be automated by 2030. That's a lot of jobs getting a digital makeover or potentially disappearing altogether. If you think about it, it is kind of unnerving. So the big question now is, are they here to replace us? In some cases, yes. In fact, in a lot of cases. AI could impact 300 million jobs. That is a projection, 300 million jobs. That's about 9.1% of all jobs in the world. According to the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, 60% of all jobs will be affected by AI in some way. So yes, AI is coming for your job in some way. But before you dust off your resume, consider this. These agents aren't flawless. Some of them are in the development stage. They have their own car crash moments. Also, there are ethical dilemmas, like who controls these agents? How do we ensure that they do not perpetuate biases? How do we prevent them from wreaking havoc? And more importantly, will they ever understand the subtle art of office small talk? You see, AI excels at repetitive, data-driven tasks. They can process inquiries. They can schedule meetings. What they cannot do, at least not yet, is empathize or dream up big ideas. For that, you will still need humans. So here is the bottom line. Virtual employees are no longer science fiction. They're here reshaping the workplace in real time, but they're not perfect. And let's face it, they lack the human touch. So will they replace us entirely? Highly unlikely. Will they change how we work? Absolutely. So the key is to resist, not to resist this wave of automation, it is to evolve with it. We embraced computers, email, and the internet, and we can do the same for AI. Find a way to collaborate, learn to work with these new virtual colleagues. Lean on them for what they do best and focus your energy on the things that only humans do best. Because at the end of the day, the magic of the workplace is not just about efficiency, it's also about the human spark. And no algorithm can replace that. Have you watched or heard of Squid Game? It is a Korean series and it's a global hit. It is the most popular show on Netflix ever, the most popular ever, and it has returned for a much anticipated season 2. But not everyone is happy about this, including Vietnam, the Southeast Asian country. Squid Game has sparked criticism in Vietnam. Many viewers are accusing the show of distorting history and of whitewashing atrocities. They want to boycott Squid Game. And now Vietnam is mulling taking it off the air. It seems the real game has begun for Squid Game. Can it come out alive? And what's behind this controversy? Our next report tells you.
Let's play. Do you know the most watched non-English show in the world? Well, here's a clue. It's the most watched show on Netflix. We're talking about Squid Game, the smash hit Korean series where hard luck contestants compete to death in sadistically themed children's games. Its second season released the day after Christmas and has already drawn more than 124 million viewers the world over. But not everyone is a fan. Squid Game has sparked criticism in Vietnam for allegedly distorting history, and now the show is facing calls for a boycott in the country. The controversy stems from a particular scene which has a dialogue referencing the Vietnam War. In the scene, the character Dai Ho describes his family's military history. He says, "My father wanted me to become a real man, so he sent me to the Marines. My father was a Vietnam War veteran." That's when other contestants respond by praising his father, saying, "Your father must be an honorable man." This exchange has angered many viewers in Vietnam. They say the series is glorifying South Korean soldiers who served in the Vietnam War. They are quote-unquote whitewashing the atrocities committed by the soldiers. Reactions on Vietnamese social media say they are boasting about a war fought on the blood and bones of another nation. And Korea always demands reparations from Japan, but proudly boasts about deploying troops to Vietnam. You see, South Korea and Vietnam share a fraught history thanks to the Vietnam War. It was a long divisive conflict fought between 1955 and 1975. It pitted the communist government of North Vietnam against South Vietnam. The North was supported by China and the Soviet Union, while the South was supported by the United States and other non-communist nations, including South Korea. Between 1964 and 1973, South Korea deployed around 320,000 troops to Vietnam, and they fought alongside the US Army in exchange for US aid to resuscitate their ailing economy. And the South Koreans were a brutal fighting force. It's estimated that they killed more than 41,000 enemy fighters and slaughtered 9,000 innocent Vietnamese. Yet Seoul has been adamant that there's no evidence of such atrocities. The Vietnamese government has never publicly pushed for an apology, so neither country has really addressed the wartime baggage. But time and again it pops up. Like in 2022, when Little Women was removed from Netflix Vietnam after being accused of distorting history through a controversial dialogue where South Korean soldiers were portrayed as heroes. And now, Squid Game faces a similar fate. The Vietnamese Culture Ministry is taking the backlash seriously. They are reviewing the second season of Squid Game, re-evaluating whether it violates laws and misrepresents the nation's history. Depending on the ministry's findings, the show could be pulled from Netflix Vietnam. So the game will not stop, but in Vietnam, the Squid Game show might just.
Before we begin our last story tonight, let's go back to medieval times. During the Middle Ages, people held a strong idea about food. They believed that what they ate affected their mood. So if they were feeling down, they would reach for dates or pears. If they were anxious, it would be chicory or lettuce. But over the years, it seems to have changed. We seem to have lost the idea that food can affect our brain. Today, as a society, we are so used to feeding our bodies that we seldom think of the brain. We connect what we eat with the shape of our waistline. And many of us forget that the same diet feeds one of our biggest organs, the brain. Food alters our brain chemistry. It shapes our thoughts and our actions. You may have heard the saying, "You are what you eat." Well, it's true. Decades of research proves it. Your stomach and brain have a connection, and it begins before you're even born. It starts in the womb. The brain and the gut originate from the same cells in the embryo. And as you grow older, this connection only gets stronger, so much so that the gut is called the second brain. Day after day, what you eat is broken down. It turns into nutrients. These nutrients are taken into the bloodstream. They're carried up to the brain. And once there, they become the very fabric of your brain. And this is very crucial. You see, our brain works very hard. It works 24 hours a day. Even when we sleep, the brain is active. So it needs a lot of fuel. Our brain makes up only 2% of our body weight, but it uses 20% of our energy. The brain is the hungriest organ. So what we feed it matters. I can give you 3 reasons why. First, because of the mind's physical building blocks, our cells replace continuously. You probably learned this in primary school. But a quick disclaimer, while this is true for most of the body, it does not apply to the brain. A majority of our brain cells stay with us for our entire lives. So if you need high quality brain cells, you need high quality food. Now, healthy food protects your body, you know that. It can protect you from cancer, diabetes, heart disease. It can make you live longer. But it also helps your brain. And this is the second reason. A healthy diet can protect your mind. It can shield your brain from harm. It reduces the risk of stroke. It slows brain aging. It boosts memory. It even reduces the risk of Alzheimer's. This is the same disease that affects 46 million people today. By 2050, it is projected to affect 130 million people. And for the longest time, this projection has seemed inevitable because Alzheimer's is seen as a result of bad genes and aging. But here's what newer research says. The genes may load the gun, but it is the lifestyle that pulls the trigger. 1/3 of all Alzheimer's cases can be prevented if people eat a healthy diet. So there are long-term benefits and short-term ones as well. This brings us to the third reason. Food can affect your mood. It can happen when you don't eat something. For instance, if you have a vitamin B2 deficiency, you are more prone to depression. It can also happen when you eat too much of something. If you eat a lot of processed foods, a lot of sugar, it increases inflammation. This is the root cause of stress and low mood. Yet the world over, 6 out of every 10 people eat junk food regularly, while 9 out of 10 do not eat enough fruits and vegetables. The good thing is, it's never too late to start. Our brain has a fascinating quality. It is plastic. So the way you learn a new language or a new skill, you can train your brain to prefer healthy food, to eat better. And the way new information changes your thoughts, opinions, and actions, healthy food can make you a better version of yourself. So listen to your gut and start feeding your brain right. Here in India, we won't miss Justin Trudeau, the politician, but we will miss his antics. Remember when he came to New Delhi? People could not decide what was worse, his bhangra or his dinner invite to Khalistani terrorists. That's when India was introduced to Trudeau. But his career is full of such antics. Like in 2012 when he tried boxing, only to be punched in the head straight away. Or his party trick of falling down the stairs randomly. Trust me, it is as weird as it sounds. Take a look.
I intend to resign as party leader, as Prime Minister.
c'est vraiment un fun, là, vous
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Extreme rainfall hit Saudi Arabia, submerging the holy city of Mecca. International sculptors get creative at the annual China Ice Festival. And newly arrived pandas play around in the snow at the National Zoo in Washington, D.C. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 2015, 2 gunmen stormed the Paris office of satire magazine Charlie Hebdo. 12 people were killed. The magazine was targeted for publishing controversial caricatures of Prophet Muhammad. The attack sparked global outrage, with millions rallying in solidarity with the slogan, Je suis Charlie. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
From breaking news to the day's biggest controversies, shedding light on the world's top headlines, detailed analysis on the stories that matter the most to you. Catch it all on Spotlight at 6 p.m. India time and 12:30 GMT, only on Firstpost.